Welcome to Mind Owl. My name's Veena Ugargle and I'm a cognitive behavioural therapist. I'm also a yoga therapist for mental health. I have 8 years experience of working both in the NHS and privately, and I work with people to help them manage a range of different difficulties. So this can be things like day-to-day stress, specific anxiety disorders such as OCD or panic disorder, social phobia, generalised anxiety disorder, or depression. And I also help people who've experienced traumatic experiences in their life, who may be suffering from PTSD. As a yoga therapist, I draw on approaches from yoga, but also mindfulness to help people manage these common mental health difficulties. In this module, we'll be looking at how to understand stress and anxiety, and we'll be exploring mindfulness-based practices to help us develop ways to better manage stress and anxiety that we might be experiencing. So in session 1, we'll learn some basics about the nervous system, to understand how and why stress and anxiety affects our body. So often we think that stress and anxiety is something that really should just affect us in our mind, but it does affect us in our body. So we'll understand a little bit about why that is. We'll also use a body scan practice, which is a mindfulness practice to help us practice coming out of our mind and into our body, which is one way for us to develop a tolerance to difficult emotions, difficult sensations, which sometimes can be part of our anxiety, and also difficult thoughts that we might experience. In session 2, we'll explore a key feature of anxiety, which is worry. We'll think about worry can actually sometimes be useful, so we'll think about the usefulness of worry as well as the times that it's not so useful. And we'll also think about different categories, different types of worry, which can also help us to be able to manage that key feature of anxiety, that worry problem that comes up for us. In session 3, we'll practice using mindful awareness to help us reduce the amount of time that we spend worrying, so we can find that we can really, it's almost like worry soaks up time like a sponge. So this will be about practicing allowing that worry to be there, but it not taking up as much of our time and our attention. And then in module 4, we'll turn our attention back to the nervous system to understand how breathing is linked to feelings of anxiety, but is also linked to feelings of calm and feeling a sense of relaxation or a sense of peace. And we'll practice a way to be able to turn down the anxiety and turn up that sense of calm by breathing in a certain way. In sessions 5 and 6, we'll develop more of an understanding of what mindfulness is, and importantly what it isn't. And we'll start to deepen our mindfulness practices by using some short formal practice, but also thinking about informal ways, so ways that we can kind of drop mindfulness into our day without having to find a lot of extra time to kind of devote to a mindfulness practice. One thing that can be helpful that I'd really recommend you having a go at before you move on to each of the sessions is drawing a model of your anxiety. So in CBT we call this a 5 areas model, and that's basically because it has 5 areas. So the first area that we would be identifying is thinking about the triggers for our anxiety. So this could be anything from some sort of external trigger. So let's say, for example, you suddenly get given another big project at work and that makes you feel anxious. It could be something that is internal. So sometimes our anxiety comes from a particular sensation that we might be experiencing. So for example, feeling very hot, or having a sense of like heart palpitations, or heart beating very fast or hard. So the first part, as I say, is to identify your triggers. And then the other 4 parts that we are looking at identifying is to think about what kind of goes through our mind when we are triggered. So these can be thoughts. So for example, I'm not going to be able to make the deadline. What if I don't finish on time? What if I let my team down? So we can almost imagine these words and sentences going through our mind. So that's what we want to capture when we are identifying the thoughts aspect of the 5 areas model. Also, what can go into this box is images. So sometimes we might imagine ourselves in a particular situation, and that can be part of what drives difficult emotions as well. So for example, if I needed to present at a team meeting, I might actually be imagining myself stood up, frozen, not being able to say anything, and that in itself creates a sense of anxiety. We can also be kind of remembering things from the past, images from the past that create difficulties for us. So that's what would go in the thoughts area of the 5 areas model. We then also want to think about the emotions that are triggered when our trigger situation arises. So examples of emotion words are things like feeling anxious, stressed, dread, on edge, panicky, annoyed, frustrated, guilty. These are all examples of emotion words that we want to be capturing in that box. We then also want to be capturing any physical sensations that we notice when we're triggered. So common anxiety physical sensations are things like our heart rate increasing, feeling hot or sweaty in our palms, for example, tension headaches, tension around our shoulders or our jaw. Sometimes we can have an upset stomach, we can be grinding our teeth at night or even just clenching our teeth. So these are all examples of physical sensations, things that change in our body when we are triggered, and they are things that would go in that area of the 5 areas model. Finally, we want to try and capture what changes in our behaviour when we are triggered. So usually behavioural changes are anything that we can see somebody doing or not doing. So for example, we might see someone making a lot of lists if they're feeling anxious about something, or lots of planning. We might see someone perhaps checking things a lot. So a common one is checking email a lot, or checking the actual email that they've written a lot of times before actually sending it in case there's mistakes. We might see someone perhaps never delegating anything to anyone else because they feel like they want to do it on their own to make sure it's done properly or done to a certain standard. So these are all kind of behavioural changes that we might be able to observe in somebody else if they were doing those things. Behavioural changes can also be things that happen internally as well. So if we are worrying a lot of the time, this is a behaviour, so it's not necessarily something that we can see, but it is something that we are doing. It's something that we're doing behaviourally. We might also analyse or overanalyse a lot of the time, go over things over and over again in our mind. Again, this is a behavioural change. So once we've captured all of those 5 areas, so the trigger, the thoughts or images that might be occurring alongside of that trigger, the physical sensations and the emotions that are triggered, and the behavioural changes that occur in that particular trigger situation, what that helps us to see, I'm going to draw some arrows in between all of these areas, and what that indicates to us is that all of these things don't happen independently. They all happen in a way that kind of influences all of the other areas of the model. So for example, if I'm thinking to myself, what if I let my team down? It's likely that I'm going to start to feel anxious or a little bit panicky or a bit stressed. If I am spending a lot of time worrying about something or constantly checking something or never delegating and doing everything myself, it's likely that I'm going to feel stressed and anxious. So your 5 areas model really helps you to get a sense of, first of all, what are my trigger situations? So what are the situations that I should probably be aware of? And it really helps you to think about how these different things affect you and how they fit together to kind of keep the feelings of stress and anxiety and any other kind of negative feelings that might be coming up, how they keep those feelings going. So having a picture of how these elements all fit together for yourself and influence each other can be really helpful as you work through these modules, as you work through these sessions. You can keep referring back to it. So, a life without stress and anxiety sounds nice. A lot of my clients and patients would wish for that. But actually, we do need some stress and anxiety in our life. At low levels, stress helps us to develop resilience. It allows us to become practiced at adapting to new situations. It also allows us to become alert to important things that we need to attend to. So we want to kind of try and not have any ideas in our mind about completely eradicating stress and anxiety from our life, because that almost is not as helpful as having too much. But of course, when stress and anxiety is at excessive levels, and we might be feeling stressed and anxious in situations where it's not necessary, then that's when stress and anxiety isn't helpful for us. And we want to think about doing some things to try and help us to manage those levels of stress and anxiety. So I hope that these sessions give you some tools to recognise when anxiety and stress is becoming a problem in your life, and to help you develop a sense of calm, and really to help you learn to live alongside and become more tolerant of uncertainties and discomfort that tend to drive anxiety and stress, to be able to live alongside them in a way that is much less impactful to your well-being.